In this video, I'm going to show you how to install a rear performance caliper on this Nissan Pathfinder. Let's get started. Use a 21mm socket, remove all 5 of your lug nuts, and then remove the wheel. Let's crack the banjo bolt free. Use an 11mm socket. It's easier to do this now while the caliper is mounted securely rather than after it's off. All right, I'm going to snug it back up so we don't lose fluid, but at least it's broken free. With a 19mm socket, let's break free and remove the 2 caliper bracket 2-knuckle bolts. This top one I can get with a socket. Unfortunately, I can't fit a power tool in here. I'm going to bring it most of the way out. The bottom one, however, will have to be done with a wrench. Okay, set this aside. This one also has a washer. Now you should be able to pry the caliper off. This one's a little bit rusty. You might need a pry bar to help you out. Set this aside, but make sure you don't put any pressure on this brake hose, so I'm going to set it right on top of this upper control arm. Let's separate the new caliper from the caliper bracket. These slider pins, one will have a rubber bushing. Make sure you leave that one on its corresponding side. So I'm trying to not spin things around too much. We'll take both out, set this aside. Inside, I'm going to add some grease in these boots. I'm using brake-rated silicone paste, so it's good for heat. You don't want to use anything that'll melt. So once I do that, I'm actually going to wipe this grease off of the pin. There isn't too much to begin with anyway, and I don't like to mix it up. So I'm going to add some of my own grease here. That way I know it's greased up properly. Same with this one. Get this off. Re-grease this pin. You don't have to put a lot, because if you put too much, it's actually just going to get wiped off by the end of the boot as you slide it in. So just a thin coating. And same on this boot. I'm going to add some grease into it. Once again, they are pre-greased, but I like to put extra in. Now take a little bit of grease, put it right here on this area where the anti-rattle clips ride. Now, if you put too much, it'll actually squish out in the middle where the rotor is, so you don't want to put too much. That would be bad. It'll get on your rotor. Take the new anti-rattle clips, clip them on. Make sure they lock in all the way. If they don't want to go down, that means they're not lined up. So move it around until it does line up in the center right there. It needs to hook up and over, and then lock in. And we'll do the same to the other side. There we go. Wipe off any excess grease and put this one on also. Now let's get the caliper on, line it up with whichever bolt hole lines up first, and start the bolt in. So it'll hold it here for you. Make sure it starts in smooth and doesn't cross thread. Once that one's started, I'm going to start the bottom one. Bottom this lower one out also. Okay, that's bottomed out right there. Make that one snug. I will try to torque this, but I highly doubt that I can fit my torque wrench in here, but still I will give it a shot. 62 foot-pounds is the torque for this. If you don't have a torque wrench that fits, make it as tight as you can with a wrench. Torque the top one also. Let's take the pads out of the old caliper. There's one. This pad is stuck, so what I'm going to do is push the caliper out, use a hammer, and hit the caliper this way. That'll punch the pad out that way. Take your pads, put them in the new bracket, make sure they slide in smoothly, which these do. Take the outer one, stick that one on as well. Now, let's get the caliper mounted over. Put the caliper over. Looking at the old caliper, I'm noticing that the slider pin with the boot on it, the little damper, goes on the bottom. So I'm going to do exactly that. Start these on, just like so. Let's tighten these up, 14mm socket or wrench. If you can't fit a socket here, it's a pretty tight fit. .32 foot-pounds is the torque for both of these. That's one. And two. Remove the new banjo bolt off of the new caliper. Make sure you have both of these copper washers so that we can use those. You definitely do not want to reuse the old ones. Take the old banjo bolt off, 11mm socket. Let that caliper drain. Take the banjo bolt off. Make sure that the copper washers come off of the hose. You don't want them to be stuck on there. If they're stuck on the bolt, that's fine. It doesn't matter. We have a new bolt, but you, like I said, don't want to reuse these. They do crush under pressure, and that's basically what seals everything up. Inspect the hose, make sure it's in good condition. This one is. And then I'm going to take my new banjo bolt with a brand new copper washer, put that on. Then I'm going to stick it through the hose in the same direction that the old one went through. Otherwise the hose will be twisted. Then you want to sandwich the hose in between the washers, so I'm going to put another washer on the other side. And then it can go into the caliper, but pay attention because the hose has a little hook, and that hook needs to basically lock itself into that hole. Otherwise it will not be lined up correctly, just like that. Let's snug this up before we lose too much brake fluid. Make sure it's still properly lined up as you snug it. I'm going to make it snug with the wrench, but of course I will come back and torque this. It's very important that you tighten this properly so it does not leak or create any sort of brake loss issue. That would be a really big safety concern. 13 foot-pounds is the torque for this. This new one is also an 11mm socket. That's it right there. Perfect. Take off the bleeder screw cap. Gently pry it off if you need to. Sometimes these get a little slippery. There we go. Use an 8mm wrench. Crack this bleeder screw free. Open it up and let gravity pull fluid into the caliper and out the bleeder screw. This is called a gravity bleed. Once we get no more air bubbles out of the bleeder screw, you are going to want to perform a full manual brake bleed. At least that's what I strongly recommend, so that you can get any other potential air from the system out. It is important that you have a nice firm brake pedal. Any air bubbles in the system will cause the brakes to be squishy or potentially not to function at all. So you want to make sure you get all that out. There we go. We have a nice steady trickle of fluid. I'm going to close this up, and like I said, I will perform a full manual brake bleed after this. Snug it up, wipe off any extra fluid that's here, perform your manual brake bleed. Once you're done, cap this off, and let's clean up the mess because you don't want to confuse any residual fluid for potential leaks. Now, don't forget to pump up the brakes, do the same to the other side if needed, and let's put on the wheel. Let's get the wheel on. Start on all 5 of your lug nuts, bottom them out, and then we'll torque them to spec in a cross pattern. .83 foot-pounds is the torque for these. Go in a cross pattern. And I always like to double check them. To double check them, you can go in a circle. Pump up your brakes and take it for a road test.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.